taker.
We're good.
All right, good evening. It's Tuesday, February 18th, and this is the Charter Review Committee meeting. My name's Chris Safire. I'm the chairman of this committee. If we could go around and introduce ourselves.
My name is Nancy Sitta.
Craig Schultz.
Diane Germain.
Doreen Hayes.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. Just to bring everybody up to speed, today we had our secretary. She resigned from the board.
Our clerk.
Clerk.
Yeah.
So we will have to appoint a temporary clerk for this evening and reappoint a full-time on board at our next meeting.
I will volunteer to be the temporary clerk for tonight.
Mrs. Sito will be the temporary clerk. Do all in favor?
Aye.
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 Second, aye.
Excellent. Thank you. So, according to our agenda, start review of existing Millis charter. Let's discuss what we like about our charter, what we don't like, anything that jumped out at us.
It's short. It's brief. It's both good and bad. Much shorter than most of the other ones I saw, and not the level of detail that I saw in the other ones, too. And I'm not sure that all the detail the other ones have is necessary, but we might need a little bit more than we actually have.
But a lot's in our bylaws.
Right, exactly. It's between the two of them. I think it seems to get the job done. I don't think there's anything really horribly wrong with it, but it seems like it was a little brief and missing a few key points. There's a few things in there that might be worth changing.
So should we go through each article one section at a time? And
Yeah, slide it over, I'll share with you. It's on the desk someplace. I have 2 copies at home someplace.
do you have a copy too? Okay.
They're doing budgets right now at work.
So Article number 1, incorporation powers. Do we have any issues there?
Nope. I'm good with Article 1.
Okay. Article 2, legislative branch.
I thought it was a little brief, and there were some things I saw in other ones that I liked. I saw in, I can't remember which town it was, but I read 3 of them, so one of them talked about, town meeting length, so that it was after 11 o'clock, it required a affirmative vote to continue. I'd slide it forward to 10:30 and do an affirmative vote every half hour to continue for another half hour. I thought something like that, and I'm just, as an idea, belonged in a bylaw or in the charter somehow, so it just doesn't drag till midnight with nobody wanting to propose termination, and yet people running late. But just some mechanism that it has a time frame associated with it, so that it doesn't take somebody having the courage to stand up and say, let's go home and come back and try this again. But
Right.
it just automatically kicks in with the moderator after a certain point. If we have 1 article left, people vote yes. If we have 6, they're going to vote no and come back another night.
Well, it's a good point, especially if you have folks with children.
Yeah.
It makes it tough when you're out all night.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I don't know if this is the right section, but the presiding officer, the moderator, and I'm a little off topic here, but I did see in another town that they have a deputy moderator. It's kind of like being Miss America. If you can't serve, someone else will serve in your place. And I think that's a good idea to have a deputy.
And I saw another one that mentioned that the clerk serves if the moderator
Right.
cannot.
The town
So-
clerk?
Yeah, the
Yeah, a lot
town
of them
clerk.
do.
Not ours, but I think I saw another one that said that too. So I think it would make sense to have a backup moderator clause, whatever that may be.
So
That's
How would
2-7.
How do we do that since it's a elected position and they have to run for office?
You could designate the clerk in the bylaws or other appointee, a clerk in the bylaws, I think, would satisfy that, or a deputy moderator,
So just for that evening?
just for that evening, just for that one meeting. Actually, yeah, just for the meeting. I think I don't know what the mechanism would be, and that's why we have town council coming in, but I bet you could come up with some clause that allows it.
And,
Town council was supposed to come in tonight, however, he's at another meeting.
Good.
So he may or
Come
may
again.
not come in, so if he doesn't, we can
Yeah.
go through Mr. Kaczynski to arrange for that.
and Holliston said that, sorry, I interrupted.
That's okay.
Holliston said that their minutes are also recorded with a machine, as well as handwritten as a backup.
What's
And those-
recorded?
The
Minutes.
town meeting is recorded,
Okay.
and those files are kept for 10 years in the town clerk's office as a backup
So
to minutes.
recorded like audio or?
Yes, audio.
No, I was just gonna say that, as far as the presiding officer, I have seen situations in other communities where the deputy is not necessarily an elected person, but someone that the moderator would have the authority to appoint, as the deputy, only for the length of that one-year term or whatever that is, and then they'd have to decide whether to reappoint. And again, it's only if the moderator, by some reason or other, is unable to attend the meeting. So that's certainly an option to look at. But as far as town council is down the hall at another meeting this evening. And I can certainly, I believe your next meeting is on the 9th, and I'm sure you'll get the scheduling later in the meeting, but I believe that was a doable date for
Do you want to come up there so you're on
the town moderator.
camera and stuff?
At least on audio.
Yeah, yeah.
I get yelled at for that.
I don't know if this is the right place either, but a lot of towns do moderator for 3 years.
I talked to Aaron
Weren't
about
we?
that. The town moderator
Association,
association, whatever
right.
it's called, highly recommends one-year terms. That way, if you're dissatisfied with your moderator, you can get rid of them every year. So you're not stuck with a bad moderator. That's what their recommendation is. Because it's such a public-facing, control the meeting kind of position, and there's but the one of them, as opposed to 3 selectmen, 9 finance committee, 5 school committee, there's just the one moderator. So it's the recommendation, we don't have to follow their recommendation, but the recommendation is every year run for election, so if people are dissatisfied, there's the opportunity to move that position quickly.
But that's really unusual since most of the towns, because I made a list, and most all the
Right.
towns have 3-year
3 years.
moderators.
Yeah, that's
There's
just,
only one that's appointed.
Right.
well, none of them are appointed. They
Okay.
run every 3 year, they run every year is what the recommendation was, that I was told. And that's the problem we've had here in the past. People didn't want to run for more than 1 year at a time. They want to do it until it stops being fun.
Well, something to
So,
talk
something-
about.
We can discuss it if we want,
Yep.
yeah, all we want.
All right. Are we good with that section? I think? Executive branch. So the one in that section that sticks out is composition of the board,
Yeah.
3 or 5-member board.
Yeah.
But still 3-year terms?
3-year term,
Yeah.
3 or 5-member board. I can see where, obviously a 3-member board, that workload can probably overwhelm the 3 individuals that sit there. Better accessibility by the residents if you have 5 as opposed to 3. I think one of the other things is the ability for them to talk to each other, like, two at a time, whereas right now, you can't.
Correct.
Um,
I think that's kind of significant. Plus, each of the board members generally attends a certain number of committee meetings, and that would spread it out a little bit better if there were 5 of them, I think.
And it would keep it in line with the school committee, which is also 5 members.
Yeah, it would also offer a broader, like, diversity of skills and ideas. I think the con, from talking to several other communities over the last week, is one of the things that kept coming up is the meetings may run a little bit longer than a three-member board. That's one thing that had come up. But other than that, and my only thing is we have problems filling committees now in town with people.
Agreed, but the flip side is if we have a 5-member board and we guarantee that they will have less work, more people may volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm just saying, like.
Well, hopefully that would be the
Um,
flip side.
And school committee fills with 5, just on the other side of that.
That's good. Out of 298 communities in Massachusetts, 157 or 53% have 3-member boards. 140 or 47% have 5-member boards. Population between 5 and 10,000, 48% of them have 3-member boards, and 52% have 5-member boards.
So smaller towns have a higher, not dramatically, but a higher percentage of 5-member boards than the larger ones, is what I'd assume from that.
It's close to split, but still,
That's, yeah,
that-
I
I think
expected to hear a
that's-
number, those 80% had
No,
3-member
yeah.
boards. Were the-
Yeah, I mean, the only real big discrepancy was population 0 to 5,000, 94% have 3-member boards.
Yeah.
And then 20,000 plus have 5.
Yeah.
5 of them have 3-member boards. So,
Yeah, we're in that sweet spot.
Doreen, do you have an opinion about this?
Well, I was thinking about the 5, because it actually makes it easier to have a quorum and a better discussion of issues, I think.
Yep. I mean, you've attended a lot of the meetings. Okay.
elections and
Can we ask Mike about this list of grocery list? Sorry, I keep hitting that mic. The grocery list of chief administrative officer duties?
Yes, section 3.5. That's the section I probably have the greatest interest in. And I think I do have some thoughts on that. I was going to have put those together for tonight before I was out a good part of last week sick. I certainly do have some feedback to give the committee and thoughts on that particular section. I'd probably ask just to hold off until your next meeting on that. And I will make a point to put my thoughts together in a cohesive fashion by then.
So that's March 9th.
Yes.
Good.
Elections and other elected offices.
I think Nancy brought up the recall article last time. I think something like that should be put in there for an elected position.
Actually, that was Diane that
Okay.
mentioned it.
And then the appointed clerk was the other one. I've got a question on, if the clerk is appointed, Mike, and we have somebody in there now who's 40-hour-week union position, the clerk would be a management position, wouldn't it? So if it was appointed, I'm not saying we're doing it, but if it was an appointed position, that'd move out of the union and into management level? Or would we have trouble doing this, is I guess my question?
That would not be a given.
Okay,
I'd put it that way.
okay, I'm just trying to find out how much of a problem we might have.
So, right now, all the staff, with the exception of the town clerk, are union employees. And if the town clerk was made appointed, it would be probably a subject of discussion as to whether or not that would be a union position. Not saying one way or another.
Right.
But it wouldn't be a foregone conclusion one way or the other.
I've just always heard eliminating a position is somewhat difficult under collective bargaining, but, because you wouldn't want to appoint a clerk for 40 hours a week and still have a 40-hour-a-week.
That's part of
Staff
the,
member.
part of the issue is that if you were to, if, as part of the plan, were to reduce the hours of a union position and increase the hours of the non-union position, and they'd be taking over what was formerly formerly union work, that would be a problem.
Yeah, I just don't have any experience with this at all, and I've always heard that.
Be
that was a-
thankful.
So,
Yeah,
so all the department heads, Carol Johnston and the treasurer, they're all union?
Oh, no. Well, certain employees in the town, the finance director is not a union employee.
Okay.
She's a contract employee of the town, as in, she has a separate contract with the town.
Right?
The DPW director is not a union member. My assistant is not a union member.
remember that one, yeah.
But most other people that work in this building are members of the union, that work over 10 hours a week.
And is the current town clerk?
The current town clerk is not, because she's elected.
Okay.
But for the appointed and/or hired employees, virtually all the rest of them are in the union.
Thank you for including the organizational assessment that was done in June 2019. That's an eye-opener, if anybody hasn't read that yet.
I think that, yeah, if there's any discussion with the town clerk, the town clerk's position or office, that's a critical document to review.
I also saw that some towns appoint a planning board. And I talked to a current member of the planning board and said, what are the pros and cons? And I thought the pros of elected versus appointed were continuity on the planning board, because projects span sometimes several years before they get done. And knowledge of all of the legislation that really drives the process. That takes time too, so.
Yeah, I think, my experience has been more often than not, planning boards are elected. Again, there are pros and cons depending on your viewpoint as to whether you want them being sort of an independent elected arm or voice of interpreting the zoning bylaws and, you know, managing growth. But I think in every town I've worked in, they've been elected.
Okay, that's good.
There's not a number of years, length of service in the planning board? Should it be open to serve?
It's a 5-year term.
5-year term.
5-year
Yeah.
term?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry.
5 members, 5-year
All
term.
right.
Sorry.
But some are junior members when they join, and then at some point become full members of the planning board.
Yeah.
Okay,
So in that section, we have the planning board and the town moderator. Right? Gonna look at
Yeah. See if they have any feedback.
town clerk.
clerk,
Clerk, moderator, and
Yep.
and planning board are the 3 we discussed
Yep.
a change on.
housing authority, board of health.
Is there anything in here, I don't remember seeing it, that says you must attend X percentage of meetings before you may be asked to leave?
I'm not aware of it.
I didn't see anything like that.
I haven't seen it.
Those types of inclusions, whether they're in the charter or the bylaws, have really come more into existence in the past 10 years or so. So they'll probably prior to the last time this was reviewed, that would have been an unusual thing to see. You do see it a lot more in towns, just to make sure that boards aren't put in a position where they have someone on the committee that never comes, and there's always a problem with a quorum or other issues in getting the work of the committee done. So certainly something that the committee could review and discuss, whether or not some provision in there would have some use. A lot of times, even if they're an appointee of the select board, there's a hesitancy to remove people unless, there's more of a desire to ask them to resign than to actually take the proactive step of removing them.
I mean, we want to add a recall option, but that's quite different from asking someone to resign because they don't come to meetings.
Right.
And having served on a few committees with people that were no-shows that, signed out, it's taking up a space. If we're trying to have 8 people or 9 people have a discussion and we consistently have 7, the same 7 show up and
Right.
2 don't, it really does a disservice to the community. They get appointed, they'll be on the committee, talk about being on the committee, and attend the first meeting after they're appointed, and you don't see them again,
Yeah, I mean, I'm
And then we
familiar.
lose their view.
I am familiar with some towns that do have bylaws, or perhaps a charter provision that says if a member of an appointed body fails to show up to 4 meetings in a row without any, without prior notice or approval of the chair, they can be automatically removed from the committee.
You slap in the may be removed, and then it's discretionary if they've had a.
Then the chair basically
Yeah.
has the discretion to
Yeah.
call it and say, we're sending them the notice.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, some kind of removal process. I don't know what the wording would be, but something like that would be very helpful, I think.
Sometimes there are situations where someone's on a committee, they might travel to Florida for 2 months in the
Yeah.
winter, and they know they're going to miss 3 out of the 12 meetings a year, and the committee's fine with that.
Right.
And it's just. but
And that's why
usually
having
notice
the
is
may,
given.
may be
Yeah.
removed, not shall be removed.
Yeah.
And was that in any of those other comps at all? No. Any of that language?
I don't remember.
I don't recall
I
it.
don't recall it either.
Down that Bridgewater has less than, minus 3 meetings or 50% of the meetings that they could dismiss the person.
Okay.
I like your word better, I just wrote remove.
And that was Bridgewater?
Yeah, that was in
Dismiss
their
is almost positive.
town charter. Now, I was noticing, do we have a thing for elected town vacancies, like if someone were to leave midterm?
There are state laws that address that. If you're for an elected position, like if you're elected, say, to the planning board, and you have a resignation, you can fill that seat until the next regular election by the remaining members of the planning board meeting with the select board, and then they have a vote to fill the seat. You can do that with all boards and committees except the select board and the school committee. Actually, no, I take that back. School committee, you can do that. But again, it would be the school committee and the select board that would get together, and it would be a majority vote to fill a vacancy.
Does it mean it's not necessary to have it in our charter then?
Maybe in the bylaws.
Yeah, that is, unless the charter has something different, that would be the process that would be followed under the state law. If you were interested in looking at some other way to do that, we'd have to check with town council to see if you could vary from that state kind of advised process.
Yeah. Especially with having a select board of only 3. If there's a issue for.
That's the one board you can't do that with. If
I know,
if you have a vacancy on the select board, that vacancy is going to remain until the next election. You can hold a special election,
Yeah,
but it's going to remain vacant until the next election.
and that goes to argue for 5 even more. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you were to have one member resign,
Yeah.
then basically you couldn't hold a meeting unless every other remaining member
Yeah.
showed up at the meeting.
A little off the subject, I have a question. Why is the FinCom the only board where you can't be elected to some other board and serve on FinCom? Here's Jay.
I can take a stab at that.
Yeah, go ahead, I read something about it.
Someone just walked in the room that could
Yeah.
probably answer it better than
Yeah.
I can. But I believe it's because the Finance Committee deals with the finances of the
Yeah.
town, and most elected officials, not all, but many elected officials have some authority over funds from the town, and they want that Finance Committee to be totally independent of all the other functions that elected officials have. So I think it's more of a split between the executive branch and the legislative branch.
And that's
Because the
the answer
Finance
that I
Committee
heard.
actually represents, it's the one committee that represents the legislative branch of government. All other committees essentially are part of the executive branch.
Yeah, and that's the reason I'd heard the separation of powers argument.
Kind of assumed because of the checkbook.
Second one is, why would you want to be on the finance committee and be elected to anything else?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Sir,
I don't know if everyone knows our town council, Attorney Jay Talaman, who has been practicing law for a very long time, municipal law. I won't say how many. But Jay and I've known Jay for over 20 years in the field, and he just came from the ZBA hearing, which I hope went well. And I didn't know, I know we're trying to set up a regular meeting for you to come in and answer questions and talk a little bit about charters and processes. But I don't know if you wanted to introduce the members of the committee to Jay first, and then if, I don't know if you had anything for the committee.
No, I mean, I just want to be helpful along the way. I mean, there are some things that, I mean, I can offer both legal advice and just some practical advice based on my experience working on charters. So, well, I just want to be a resource for you all. I'm not going to lecture anyone on what a charter should be or shouldn't be.
thank you for coming, sir. My name's Chris Sophia. If we could go around one more time for our guest and introduce ourselves.
Nancy Sitta.
Craig Schultz.
Diane Germain.
Doreen Hayes.
So I'm wondering, I know that we were discussing the selectmen next week, but should we bring Mr. Talman back
Yeah,
prior to?
I think that'd be a great idea.
So
Are
your
you,
next meeting is scheduled for March
9th.
9th.
It's 2 weeks, I think, isn't it?
So,
March
9th.
2 weeks.
I believe that's
So-
about 2 weeks from tonight.
You sure we don't have a select board meeting that night?
I am positive.
Okay,
We have a select board meeting on the 2nd, the 16th, and the 30th of that month, but not the 9th.
3 of them?
Yeah. And you've got, is this right? You have a meeting scheduled for the 9th and 23rd, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
yeah,
I've got 5 Monday meetings in March.
Pretty
2
exciting.
with you and 3 with the selectmen. I'm
So
feeling
the
very special.
selectmen are 3, 2, and what others?
The selectmen are meeting the 2nd, the 16th, and the 30th.
Okay.
yeah, there's 3 Mondays in the month.
So,
I know where my
the
husband is.
9th, what time
5
on the
Mondays,
9th?
but 3.
The committee usually meets at 7:15.
Oh, we're sticking with the 7:15 time, right?
Yeah, I can make that work usually. It's just we're in the middle of budget and I had to fix something on the
Okay.
system today.
I get it.
I left an 18-year-old hit the button when it was done. Hopefully it works. Only a $40 million.
So I think,
What could go wrong?
You had on your agenda the possibility of meeting with the members of the select board that evening. Did you want, how did you want to schedule that with Jay? Did you want him to?
On the 2nd?
No, on the
Oh,
9th.
I'm sorry, the 9th.
I mean,
That'd
just,
be a tough one with Jay, yeah, because we're starting them every half hour and I don't want Jay to have to wait.
No, let's start him first.
got it.
Why
Yeah,
not?
I think Mr. Kaczynski, we can, only two are available, right?
Yeah, so I can, if you want, I could have one come in, one of the members come in at 8 and one at 8:30. That'll give you 45 minutes with Jay ahead of time.
That'd be good. Which two are they?
I believe they would be Selectman Germain and McCaffrey.
We'll work on it.
I can do that.
I mean, I think that would be great if we could meet with you prior to.
Sure, and if you have anything ahead of time that you want me to address, I'm happy to do it.
Great.
Yeah, so if you want, if you had a list of questions that you wanted to, just throwing it out there, forward to the chief, and I'll make sure they get to Jay, because there might be some overlap, but get to Jay and at least give him a head start to try to answer some of those questions more thoroughly at the meeting.
So if we did have a list of questions, I'd like to shoot probably for next week to get the questions over to you, so there's an ample amount of time. If you have a busy
It's how
schedule.
complicated they are.
Uh,
I'm pretty responsive, and if it's pretty basic stuff, you'll hear from me in a few minutes.
Okay.
If it's something I gotta think about and collect some information for you all, then it might take a little longer, but obviously as much lead time as possible, but if it's late breaking and you need something, I'll always try and accommodate.
And Mike, we have you on that night as well
Yes,
for your section.
my comments,
Yeah.
yes.
Right now, our questions aren't too tough, I don't think, yet, but we'll see what they get.
I do have one, if I may. May I? Sir?
You got it.
We were talking about adding a recall option for elected officials. Is that common in towns?
It's not uncommon.
Okay.
So, it's I'd say probably about half of the towns that I represent and have represented have recall provisions. There are varying types. There are some that are kind of no-cause recalls, and then there are some where you've really got to demonstrate some kind of rationale for it. I'm in the middle of a pretty contentious recall down in the town of Kingston right now. I have some of my own thoughts on recalls. I think that they're difficult, and they divide people up more than they bring them together. These are policy questions for you all that you'll have to wrestle with, but I could give you examples when it comes time.
That would be great.
That'd be good, yeah.
I think you could just Google recall and
Oh, yeah.
and see how those go along. Which isn't to say there isn't a good reason to have them either. It's just being mindful of what sometimes they're used for and sometimes they're not used for.
I have a procedural question, I guess. Suppose we decide we want to recall provision and we base it on whatever your best recommendation is. Do you draft it, or do we take a stab at it and then you edit it? You know, how would be the way we handle that?
Because it's not like.
Because that's got to be legally right.
It's not like it's reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
So there are some that I think are thrown together a little more sloppily, but some of the newer recall ones out there, especially where they make the petitioners actually work for it a little bit more to prove the bona fides of their recall thing. There's good examples out there that you could almost go word for word with, and then we could customize as you see fit. Some of the safeguards are actually having a reason for a recall, and then a pretty high number of required signatures is also a good check on it, so you don't see a recall on an annual basis. So the towns that do require, you normally have a two-step. You need 100 people coming in, and then to get it actually certified before the voters, some towns require 20% of all registered voters' signatures on it, and that's kind of a good check on it to make sure that you don't get into a cycle where people are just Hatfield and McCoys and you're doing ping-ponging recalls back and forth every year. That tends to be a good check on things, and where only really serious recalls happen. But there's all kinds of ways to do it. So I can point you to some that I like and some that I don't like.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, so if and when that comes up, I'll be happy.
If I may, we were just talking about it before you came in, how the removal process for individuals that don't show up.
Those are good bylaws. I've come to like those bylaws over the years. I don't think you have anything like that right now.
Nothing.
You do.
So,
Not in the charter, we don't know about the bylaws. We haven't
yeah,
looked.
I mean, you could do it in the charter or the bylaws. You don't have to have it in the charter. It could be by bylaw. But the provisions where if you have to be careful because some boards only meet twice a year anyway. So you may want to carve out certain number of boards that it would apply to, but attending less than half the sessions in a year, provided that there's more than 6 sessions a year, something like that could be grounds for a motion to remove. So, because it's almost impossible, assuming that the selectman is the appointing authority in most cases, it's almost impossible for the selectman to remove for cause unless it's really drastic. And that's where lawsuits happen. So to have an automatic thing like that, where the selectmen could just put it on their agenda, look at the list, the attendance list, and make a move, especially a board that needs members, some of the land use boards that are trying to retain quorums for supermajorities. So,
Thank you.
yeah, those are good. I've come to think that those are good tools to have.
So would you suggest putting it in the charter or into the bylaws?
Well, it's certainly easier to put it in the bylaws itself. Just one less thing to have to go through another level or two of review than the charter. That's up to you, though. You could put it in the charter.
I would say the only reason I'd advocate charter is because we actually have a charter review committee, and we don't have a bylaw review committee, so even though there might be another at
Which
this
isn't
moment.
to say
you know?
that you couldn't say,
Yeah.
hey, we're not putting this in the charter, but selectmen, why don't you guys consider this one? However you want to do it.
Yeah.
You could
The-
put it as on the list of items that you feel should be reviewed by a bylaw review committee,
Got
you know,
it.
but you considered it,
Yeah.
but you felt that, you know, not particularly this one, but in general, if you come across those ideas, just to help any future bylaw committee out there.
One thing that I'll say is that when you choose something for the bylaw, for the charter rather, just know that it's going to be that much harder to change, whereas a general bylaw is a town meeting vote, which in and of itself, as you know, Craig, not always that easy to change. You got to go through at least 2 more levels on a charter, so.
That's a good point, so we'll consider
You know, it has to be the things that you know are going to stand a multi-year test of time.
Okay,
Excellent. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Tallerman? So,
The only other question we had, and we might as well get it asked in the last one, and I was going to email him, the deputy moderator or if the moderator's sick, out of town, can't make the meeting last minute, or
We have no provision,
known, we have no provision for anybody to run the meeting. So.
not in the charter.
Town-
I didn't
town
know if
meeting.
it's something under state law.
Town meeting, yeah.
So under state law, there can be an appointment of a deputy that kind of serves for that essentially legislative period. Or if it just happened really last minute, there would be a nomination on town meeting floor. You
Okay.
could have provisions for a deputy, like in my town, where I'm moderator, just next door. I have a deputy that I appoint, and
Okay.
that would serve for the duration of my term. So it could be more temporal than that. It could be at the start of a meeting. Some moderators, in an ad hoc basis, will say right at the beginning, if they know that they might be conflicted or something, hey, can I have a motion in a second? I nominate, so-and-so to serve as the deputy. There's so many different ways to do it.
Okay.
There's certainly no harm in a bylaw, but the law doesn't leave you flat-footed either.
Okay, good.
I've been in front of town meetings before where we've had someone got sick or got stuck in traffic, and we say, okay, we're going to take a nomination from the floor. We're going to, it happens really quickly, there's always someone good, an ex-moderator, someone just has their wits about them and can struggle through. In these, sometimes I've done it where someone didn't know the parliamentary procedure parts of it that well, but I sit right there
Yeah.
and kind of help and kind of guide through and here's what a motion to amend. And so there are ways to deal with contingencies
Okay.
in that regard.
but that's better served in the bylaws and not in the charter.
No, that
Oh.
could be either. I mean, again, I think that would be kind of more of a permanent thing,
That
I
seems
would say,
permanent,
because that position isn't going away anytime soon. So that would be okay for that if you want to do it. It's pretty mild. I don't even remember the language of mine. Check Norfolk general bylaws, Craig. I think it's like 2 lines that I
Yeah.
just appoint a deputy moderator, and it just gets done. So, but towns have different things, but under Chapter 39 of the general laws of Massachusetts, there are provisions for deputy moderators, assistant moderators as well.
So if you appoint a deputy, that's almost like a built-in safeguard, as opposed to hoping that somebody's on the floor that has their wits
The
about
only
them.
thing I would say about appointing a deputy that works against me sometimes is I have someone who served as my deputy, I've been moderator for 10 years, who sometimes can't make town meeting because he's busy himself. So there's no formal deputy, so we'd be right back where we started from. Especially if it's a small special town meeting, where it's not going to be well attended, just a couple articles, just take care of some housekeeping, and for some reason, I was on a business trip or sick or whatever, then they'd be right back in the statutory. You're never left hanging, even if you have a bylaw that's a contingency, there's statutory contingencies to your contingency. So,
Good.
Excellent.
That's all I had for questions.
Yep.
There's-
Do you have anything? Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
you're
We really
welcome.
appreciate it.
Sir and Mr. Tallerman, you're like the only one in town who does that.
Sorry.
Well, thanks for stopping by to say hello to us.
Yes, I want to catch up with you in the morning on something that came up in the ZBA hearing, could be interesting.
Very good.
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Thank you,
Good to see
you
all.
Mr. J. Sir Kellerman,
Jay,
for coming.
just
See
Jay.
see you on the 9th of March.
Right, I'll see you on the 9th, and any question is a good question, so don't hesitate. Mike knows how to get in touch with me if you all don't, so.
Thank you.
Okay. Back to this scintillating document here.
General provisions. Page 11. We all good there?
I think so.
All righty. We good? Transitional provisions.
We got to this instead of most of this was written by a lawyer, and who am I to judge?
And that's the document
Yeah.
right there.
So how do we want to split things up for our next meetings? We need to talk to the selectmen.
Well, by the sounds of it, I think the March 9th meeting is an action-packed,
Yeah.
that's a full night there. We have Mr. Talaman from 7:15 to
Eight.
8.
We have 2 members of the board,
And just-
probably from 8 to 9, and then I can address the committee on my
Or if we don't have a
thoughts
lot
after
for
that.
Jay.
Yeah, if Jay is done early, then,
Yeah. I'm not trying to stretch this out. My other thought is, at least my view of it is, I prefer a little shorter, but I think there are some things that obviously need addressed. I don't think we have to stretch this into a 25, 30-page document. And having said that, let's see where we go, because we might be able to move quicker than I thought, just based on the feedback I've seen so far.
I mean, I would agree just from reading some of the other documents, there's a lot of stuff in there that
Yeah.
really doesn't need to be in there.
Right,
well, I think in our case, it's in the bylaws, so it's
right.
already handled.
I think we have to have a bylaw review committee rather soon to make sure we get all that addressed. But other than that, then I think that's the one that is a slow process, because it's a lot.
Okay, so future input, we need Loring at a future meeting, correct?
Yes.
March 23rd?
Yes, if she's available.
Yeah, let's try that one. And I guess the moderator, clerk, and those two, and finance committee chair probably need to be included at some meeting soon. Because those are the items we're addressing pretty much.
Should we invite them on the 23rd as well, or is that too much?
I'd be fine with that.
Why do you want the moderator and the town clerk?
Well, we're talking about both those positions. The moderator talking about appointing whether it goes here in the bylaws or we just ignore it, I'd like to hear what she has to say about that. And also the 1-year versus 3-year term, and get it straight from her to make sure we're getting it the right way. And town clerk, it's the one position by name that we've singled out in this thing, and it might be a polite move to have her come in to offer feedback, though I'll defer if others differ.
I think you should read the,
I have.
Okay.
Report first.
Yeah, I've seen it,
okay.
yeah. I mean, I have an opinion on it very strongly, which we'll share when we get to that point. But having her come in to state her case might be worth hearing, but we've got a very good, clear report that explains it pretty well, too.
Mike, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly say that it would be good to get the thoughts of, first, the moderator on the discussion on a deputy moderator and the term, and as far as the town clerk's report, I do know that the town clerk was not 100% in agreement with all the conclusions
Right.
that were found in that report, so it may be good to hear someone that's been the town clerk for a number of years here to see any differing view with that, so at least the committee can understand the different viewpoints involved here.
And then the finance committee chair, just because of town meeting, is the other reason I thought, just anything we're discussing there. An end time, proposed cutoff time was the only item that came out there, and see if she, I saw another one where, this is kind of almost self-serving or self-defeating, I don't know which, but it limited the original motion time to 5 minutes, but that might be a bylaw or something too. You know, there was a town that talked about the original motion introduction couldn't be more than 5 minutes in one town that I saw. Because we've talked about how do we rein people in on the finance committee from giving a 30-minute expose on minor items, you know, going into detail on unfunded bills, you know, previous year's bills, where we talk about the 75-cent box of screws from Rockies, you know, but there's some of them, like a $50 million school, where you may want to extend that. But there's some where it's going to be small, where we might be able to rein in the discussion, not the discussion, but the introduction.
So I wonder if those aren't
Within the finance
combined
committee.
responsibility of Finance Committee and the moderator. They have been,
They've asked
In the
us
past.
they've asked us to look at it and try to work on that, and we have at some level. But if
Right.
it's in the bylaw, to eliminate it. I'm just trying to think if you have a disagreement or a moderator who says go for 3 and a finance committee chair who says go for 10. If it's in for 5, you've got it. You know, then you know what your limits are. I'm just trying to put the broadest, and I'm not saying 5 is the right answer either, but
so you're talking the length of time somebody has at the mic, or
the length of time the opening motion that's made by the finance committee
Okay.
is the one that I saw. And maybe it's a bylaw and maybe it's a recommendation, but I'd like to hear some feedback from the moderator on thoughts on that one and the finance
Yeah,
committee on that one.
I think to get, just to offer to some of the key town officials, just a little feedback, and I agree that some of these items may well fit better in the bylaws than the
Right.
charter, but at least you can have the discussion at this, initial level and say, well, that's a good idea, but it may be more appropriate as a bylaw,
Right.
and kind of
I
put that in the list of bylaw considerations going forward.
I think a lot of it's at the discretion of the moderator.
Moderator does have broad discretion, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yep. And I'd attended years ago with John Northgraves many town meetings when we were trying to figure out how things were working 10, 15 years ago. I saw moderators cut off the finance committee midway through. A moderator, not often, but it was, I felt, and John and I both felt it was rather abusive of his position, that he stopped them after about 4 or 5 minutes into this presentation on something and said, okay, let's move to floor discussion now. So if it's codified, and that was not a good moderator. We've had great moderators, but if it's codified, then that protects both the finance committee and it protects the town meeting from 20-minute soliloquy.
And these are some good questions, too,
Yeah.
to follow up with Jay about, Jay's
Yeah.
been a moderator for 10 years, and I know from my 25 years of experience in going to
Yeah.
town meetings, moderators have actually an incredible amount of power at town meeting.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times town meetings whether how well or poorly they go oftentimes depends on the skill and experience of the moderator. So, there could be some items within bylaws or whatever that provide at least the guidance to town meetings. So someone knows they can't get up and give a 15-minute speech, because it
Right.
says right there, unless the moderator gives special permission, you're limited to 5 minutes. I mean, there's certainly
Right.
something to discuss.
Right, and the other one I saw was consent articles and stuff like that, consent warrant where, there's a few things we can talk about, and maybe it's bylaw too, but I saw it in other towns. For the selectmen, the finance committee, the board, selectman chair, the finance committee chair, and the moderator get together a couple days before and decide on a consent warrant to speed things up a little bit. So,
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But I think pretty much that's happening now, or has been, but,
it can be sped up a little bit more, and it was spelled out in the charter, so it was clear how it was done.
Yep.
So you didn't lump stuff together,
Okay.
inappropriately. There's been some very good steps made in that direction already, though.
yes, there have.
Yeah.
So the 23rd we have lined up
Yeah.
already, and then, I'm sorry, the 9th and the 23rd. So we, will we reach out to the clerk and moderator? I'm sorry, the moderator and the finance committee chair?
I mean, I can certainly coordinate with you.
Sure.
If you'd like to work together to coordinate them coming to the meetings.
Absolutely.
Can we do on the 23rd, Loring, the moderator, the town clerk, finance committee?
That's a lot.
I think we can do, I think we can, because I do Loring separately, but I think the other ones can be kind of a group discussion, because it all relates to town meeting. The clerk would be a separate discussion too, but the other two would be one kind of discussion, I think.
And I would suggest we time-bound everything.
Yes. Yep.
What do we want to limit it to? A half
15
hour?
minutes.
15?
For Loring, Aaron, and Jody, I think probably half hour. Town clerk, I don't think we need a half hour.
I would say Loring a half hour, Jody and Aaron a half hour, one topic. We're talking about town meeting pretty much at that point. So I think that's a half hour between with the two of them, not split between the two of them. They share the table. But I think that would work. I agree with you on the other part.
And 15 for the
15,
clerk?
yeah.
And well, again, Ms. Barnes, right at 7, you want to start with the selectmen at 7:15?
7:15, yeah. Unless it's better for her later, I don't know what her schedule would be. But
So, yeah, I can certainly confirm
Yeah.
that by tomorrow. So I would probably recommend the select board member at 7:15. We could do the town clerk at 7:45, and then the moderator and the chair of the finance committee at 8, if you wanted to do it
That'd
that way.
probably work.
Yep, I agree.
Excellent. Okay. Review and approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Could I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 5th?
Move we approve the minutes as written.
Have a second?
Second. Oh,
Excellent. Discussion topics for future.
we need to vote.
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now ask.
Excellent.
Opposed?
Anybody opposed? Fantastic. Discussion for topics of future agenda. So the next meeting, we're going to have to appoint a new clerk to the committee.
Yeah.
They have to select and appoint another member?
We should ask-
Well, that's up to the board. The board will be made aware that there's a vacancy. I don't believe a formal resignation has been submitted yet. I didn't check late this afternoon, but if that's, and then I have notified the chair of the select board of the imminent vacancy, so. You may have another member for your next meeting, or it may be the meeting after that. It just depends on timing.
So we have 6 now.
Right.
Do we need another?
Did anybody hear from Paul Jacobson?
No.
Maybe he's still sick.
I don't know if we need another or not. Actually, I would almost argue that we're
Too far in.
meetings in, and instead of starting and recapping and going through it again, I would just finish with what we have.
Do we need 7?
You don't have to complete your work, and whether or not that vacancy is filled is really up to the select board to decide.
Yeah. I don't know that we need it, but it's their call, and I don't think we're looking at anything coming down, even if Paul shows up to a 3-3 split so far from what I've seen, so.
No.
That'd be my always desire for an odd number.
And I don't see this as a contentious board.
I don't think there's much that's.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, so I mean.
Bylaw could be, but,
So we should just keep on rolling.
yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Are we done?
And I think we already discussed the future topics for the other topics. We already covered those in depth and in detail. And I'll make sure those get on the agenda for the March 9th meeting. Anything else?
I'm going to suggest that when you send out the meeting agenda, you recap in spite of the fact that it's right here and you can read it, that we have a meeting and where it's going to be,
Absolutely.
and let us know if you're not planning to attend.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll email everybody again, but I mean,
No, and I'm in the middle of our budget season, and I work late, sometimes finding out I'm working late at 5 o'clock when I'm planning to leave. So I will let you know if I can't make it, if it's one of those nights. I have no control over when it needs to be done.
sure.
Show up, Craig, or I'm going to text you.
Yeah.
So if you aren't able to show up, then do we have a quorum to meet?
Yeah, if it's still, you forward.
You need
Yes, we do.
Yeah, forward give you a quorum. I'm giving it my fullest to be here, but I'm just giving you the warning that until the budget's approved by my board of directors, I may be jumping through all kinds of hoops that aren't of my control.
Fair enough.
Are we done?
We are, yeah.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
There you go.
Aye.
The time is 8:19.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right.
You have to wave to turn the. have them
No,
turn it off, too.
they pay close attention to us.